Eleanor McBride pressed her dead husband's letter against her heart and watched the deputy nail the foreclosure notice to her door. Her hands didn't shake, not anymore. Behind her, Ruth held Benny tight, and the boy's tears froze on his cheeks in the November wind. "You got till sundown," the deputy said, not meeting her eyes. Sundown. 6 hours to pack 18 years of memories. 6 hours before the bank took everything Samuel had built before the war took him. Eleanor folded the letter into her bodice. "Children," she said, her voice steady as stone. "Start packing." If you want to follow Eleanor's journey to the end, subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Comment below what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's continue. Eleanor had known this day was coming. She'd known it when the first letter arrived from Cornelius Thorne's bank 3 months ago. She'd known it when she sold the mule to pay half what she owed. She'd known it when Thorne himself rode out to her property, looked at her land with hungry eyes, and said the words she'd never forget. "Mrs. McBride, your husband made certain promises before he enlisted. Debts don't die with the debtor." She'd wanted to spit in his face. Samuel had never mentioned any debt, but Thorne had papers with Samuel's signature, and papers meant more than a widow's word in Pinetop Crossing. Now, Deputy Wade Cotter stood on her porch, and his hands trembled worse than hers. "Ma'am, He stopped, swallowed. "I'm sorry for this." "Are you deputy?" He flinched like she'd slapped him. "Good. Let him flinch. Let him carry that shame home tonight while she carried her children into the wilderness." "Thorne gave me no choice," Wade said quietly. "He owns half this town. He owns me." "Then I pity you more than I pity myself." Wade's jaw tightened. He was young, maybe 35, with honest eyes and a coward's spine. Eleanor had seen his type before, men who knew right from wrong, but chose wrong because it was easier. "The creek land," Wade said so low she almost missed it. "Up past Raven's Shelf. Thorne don't own that. Nobody does. There's a cave up there dry deep enough to shelter in." Eleanor stared at him. "I ain't saying nothing official." Wade continued, his eyes fixed on his boots. "Just, if a woman and her children happened to walk that direction, nobody'd come looking, not in winter." "Why tell me this?" Wade finally met her gaze. "Because my mama was a widow too, and nobody helped her." He turned and walked to his horse without another word. Eleanor watched him ride back toward town, toward Thorne, toward the life of a man who'd sold his soul for a deputy's wage. Then she went inside to pack. Ruth was 12 years old, but in that moment, she looked ancient. "Mama, where will we go?" Eleanor pulled quilts from the bed, 3 of them all she had, and began rolling them tight. "Away from here." "But our home." "This stopped being our home the day your father died." The words came out sharper than Eleanor intended. She softened her voice. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." Ruth's voice was steady, too steady for a child. "I'll get Benny ready." Eleanor watched her daughter walk to the corner where 7-year-old Benjamin sat clutching his wooden horse. The toy had been Samuel's first gift to his son, carved during those long winter nights before the war, before everything changed. "Benny," Ruth said gently, kneeling beside him. "We need to pack your things." "I don't want to leave." His voice was small, broken. "Papa built this house." "I know. He said he'd come back and teach me to hunt. He promised." Ruth pulled her brother into her arms. Over his head her eyes met Eleanor's, and in that gaze was something no child should carry, the weight of understanding that promises meant nothing when men went to war. Eleanor turned away before her children could see her cry. They packed what they could carry. Eleanor took the cast-iron spider, the Dutch oven, the axe and hatchet rope, her sewing kit, hammer, and nails wrapped in oilcloth. The lamp with its remaining oil matches, beans, cornmeal, and Samuel's folding knife with the worn bone handle. From the mantel, She took one thing more. The letter. Samuel had sent it from Virginia in the spring of '64, 3 weeks before Spotsylvania, 3 weeks before a Confederate bullet ended everything. The paper was soft as cloth, now the ink fading, but Eleanor knew every word by heart. My dearest Ellie, the dogwoods are blooming here, and they remind me of home, of you. Tell Ruth I'm proud of her, and tell Benny his papa thinks of him every night. I'll be home before the leaves turn, I promise. All my love, forever. Samuel. He'd been wrong about the leaves. Wrong about coming home. But Eleanor kept the letter anyway. Kept it close against her heart because sometimes a lie was all you had left of someone you loved. She folded it carefully and tucked it inside her bodice. Mama. Ruth stood in the doorway, Benny's hand in hers. Both children wore every piece of clothing they owned, layered against the cold. Ruth carried a bundle across her shoulders. Benny clutched his wooden horse and a tobacco tin that held 3 smooth creek stones. Treasures only a child would understand. Are we ready? Eleanor asked. Ruth nodded. Benny didn't move. What if Papa comes back and we're not here? The question hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She knelt down, cupping her son's face in her work-roughened hands. Benny, look at me. He did. His eyes were Samuel's eyes, blue as summer sky, trusting as a newborn lamb. Your papa's not coming back, sweetheart. I know I told you he was watching over us from heaven, and he is. But he's not coming back to this house. He's not coming back anywhere. She swallowed hard. But I'm here. Ruth's here. And wherever we go together. That's what family means. You understand? Benny's lower lip trembled. Yes, ma'am. Good boy. She kissed his forehead and stood. Now let's go. They walked out of the only home her children had ever known, and Eleanor didn't look back. The road climbed west toward the ridge country, rutted and half frozen under November's gray sky. Eleanor had told no one where they were going. She had no wish to be pitied or questioned, no desire to see the satisfaction in Cornelius Thorne's eyes when he heard she'd been driven into the wilderness like an animal. Let him think she'd gone to family in Denver. Let him think whatever he wanted. She was done caring what powerful men thought of her. Ruth walked beside her, silent, watchful. The girl had her father's quiet strength, the kind that didn't announce itself, just showed up when needed. Benny struggled with his grain sack, his face red with effort, but he didn't complain. Samuel had taught him that. A man doesn't complain about honest work, son. A man does what needs doing. Benny wasn't a man yet, but he was trying to be, and that broke Eleanor's heart more than anything else. They walked for hours. By afternoon, they'd left the road and followed Willow Creek upstream. The water ran shallow and fast, clear as glass over a bed of rounded stones. Eleanor knew this country. She and Samuel had explored it in the early years before the children, before the war, back when they were young and foolish enough to believe happiness could last. Is it much farther, Mama? Benny's voice was small, exhausted. Not much. You're doing brave work, son. He straightened a little at that. Brave. Samuel had always told him brave men kept walking when their legs wanted to stop. The bluff rose ahead of them like stacked tables of gray-brown stone. Raven's Shelf, the locals called it, though Eleanor had never learned why. Beneath the overhang was the cave, the one Deputy Cotter had mentioned, the one she and Samuel had sheltered in once during a summer storm. There, Eleanor said, pointing. That's where we're going. Ruth squinted at the dark shadow beneath the shelf. A cave. It's dry. It's shelter. It's ours. It's a hole in the ground. Eleanor stopped walking. She turned to face her daughter, and something in her expression made Ruth take a step back. Listen to me, Eleanor said, her voice low and fierce. We have nothing. No house, no land, no money, no family coming to save us. We have ourselves, and we have each other. That cave is dry and deep and hidden, and by God, I will turn it into a home if I have to build every wall with my own 2 hands. But I cannot do it alone. I need you, Ruth. I need you to stop seeing what we've lost and start seeing what we can build. Can you do that for me?" Ruth's eyes filled with tears. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she nodded. "Yes, Mama." "Good." Eleanor touched her daughter's cheek gently. "That's my girl." They climbed the slope to the cave mouth. The cave opened wide as a barn door, but the overhang above kept the interior dry. Eleanor pushed through the juniper bushes at the entrance and stepped into shadow. The temperature dropped immediately. The stone held its chill like a miser hoarding gold. Ruth hesitated at the entrance. "It's dark." "Won't be for long." Eleanor fumbled for matches with numb fingers. The lamp took 3 tries to light. Her hands were shaking so badly, but finally, warm light pushed back the darkness. The cave ran deep, maybe 40 feet from mouth to back wall, and the ceiling rose higher than a man could reach with an axe held overhead. The walls were smooth stone water-shaped over ages. Old leaves and twigs littered the floor, blown in by wind and time. A blackened ring of stones near the center showed where others had made fires long ago. Trappers, perhaps. Travelers. Indians before the settlers came. "We'll sleep here tonight," Eleanor said. Her voice sounded strange in the cave's acoustics, echoing slightly. "Tomorrow, we start building." Ruth knelt and began unpacking quilts. Benny stood in the cave mouth, staring out at the creek and the darkening woods, his small frame silhouetted against the gray twilight. "Mama." "Yes, Benny." "Will we be warm here?" Eleanor looked at the stone walls, the cold floor, the yawning emptiness of the space. No proper hearth, no door to close against the night. Winter coming hard and fast. She thought of the work ahead, the walls to build the chimney to construct the food to find. She thought of her blistered hands, an aching back, and the 2 children depending on her. Then she thought of Cornelius Thorne sitting in his warm office counting her money, sleeping in a soft bed. "Yes," she said. "We will be warm. I promise you that." That first night nearly broke her. They huddled together under all 3 quilts. Ruth in the middle, Benny curled against his sister Eleanor on the outside where the cold bit hardest. She'd built a small fire in the old stone ring using precious matches and the driest twigs she could find. The smoke rose straight up and found a crack in the ceiling, disappearing into the darkness above. A good sign. The cave could breathe, but the cold seeped through the quilts like water through cloth. Eleanor lay awake listening to her children's breathing, feeling the chill settle into her bones. What have I done? The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. I've brought my children into a hole in the ground. I've traded a foreclosed house for a cave. She stopped herself. That kind of thinking led nowhere good. Samuel wouldn't give up. Samuel would find a way. But Samuel was dead. Samuel had been dead for 14 years, and Eleanor was so tired of being strong. "Mama," Ruth's voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, baby." "I'm scared." Eleanor pulled her daughter closer. "I know. I am too. You are. Every minute of every day since your father died." Eleanor stared up at the dark ceiling, watching the fire's shadow dance. "But being scared doesn't mean being weak, Ruth. Being scared means you understand what's at stake. Weak is giving up. And we don't give up. Not ever." Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then, "How do we not give up?" "One day at a time. One task at a time. Tomorrow we start building a wall for the cave mouth. Then we build a proper chimney. Then we figure out how to catch fish from that creek. We take it one step at a time until the steps add up to a life." That sounds hard. It will be the hardest thing any of us has ever done. Eleanor turned her head, meeting her daughter's eyes in the firelight. "But we're going to do it anyway. You know why." "Why?" "Because I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And I sure as hell won't give Cornelius Thorne the satisfaction of seeing me broken." Ruth almost smiled. "Mama, you cursed." Sometimes a curse is the only word that fits. Outside, an owl called. The creek sang its endless song. Inside the cave, Benny murmured in his sleep something about his wooden horse, about Papa, and Eleanor held her children close and made herself a promise. "We will survive this. We will build something here. And someday, Cornelius Thorne will see what we've made, and he'll know he failed to destroy us." It wasn't much of a promise, but it was enough to get her through the night. Morning came gray and bitter. Eleanor woke before the children, her body stiff, her fingers numb. The fire had burned down to embers. She fed it carefully, coaxing flames from the coals, and began planning the day's work. Walls. She needed walls. The cave mouth gaped wide, letting in wind and weather. Without a proper barrier, they'd freeze before Christmas. She left the children sleeping and stepped outside. The November air bit her face sharp as knives. Frost coated the juniper bushes. The creek ran silver in the early light. Eleanor studied the terrain with a builder's eye, something she'd learned from her father, a blacksmith who'd taught her that any problem could be solved with the right tools and enough stubbornness. Deadfall. There was deadfall everywhere, pine and oak trunks blown down by past storms, weathered silver gray, but sound at the core. No lumber mill, no money for boards, but the forest provided if you knew how to take. She was marking trees for cutting when she heard the footstep behind her. Eleanor spun the hatchet already in her hand. A man stood 10 feet away. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in worn buckskin, and a coat that had seen better decades. A trapper's coat, patched and repatched. His face was weathered, hard-lined with gray threading through dark hair that hadn't seen a barber in months. But it was his scars that made Eleanor's breath catch. The left side of his face was ruined. Burn scars crawled from his jaw, up his cheek, puckering the skin, pulling at the corner of his eye. The scars continued down his neck, disappearing into his collar. His eyes were clear, watchful, the color of winter storms. "Ma'am?" His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. "Didn't mean to startle you." Eleanor didn't lower the hatchet. "Who are you?" "Name's Josiah Harlan. I trapped these ridges." He nodded toward the cave. "Saw your smoke this morning. Came to see who was on my range." "Your range?" "Manner of speaking. I've been working these hills 5 years. Ain't seen nobody set up permanent." His eyes moved past her to the cave mouth, then back. "You planning to stay? That's none of your concern." "It is if you're planning to trap. Can't have competition cutting into my livelihood. I'm not here to trap. I'm here because I have nowhere else to go." The words came out harder than Eleanor intended, edged with exhaustion and fear, and 14 years of swallowed grief. Josiah studied her for a long moment. His expression didn't change, didn't soften, didn't harden, but something shifted in those storm-gray eyes. "You're the McBride widow," he said. "The one Thorne foreclosed on." Eleanor's grip tightened on the hatchet. "How do you know that?" "I go into town twice a year for supplies. People talk." He paused. "They say Thorne forged those debt papers. Say your husband never owed him a dime." The words hit Eleanor like a bullet. "What?" "Old Zeke Cole, the blacksmith, he was there when Thorne came asking Samuel to sign something back before the war. Samuel refused. Said he didn't need credit, didn't want debt hanging over his family." Josiah's jaw tightened. "Thorne got that signature somehow anyway. And now you're out here in a cave, and he's got your land." Eleanor couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Forged. The papers were forged. Samuel never... Why didn't anyone tell me? Her voice came out raw, broken. "Because Thorne owns half the town. Because people are scared. Because..." Josiah stopped, looked away. "Because folks find it easier to look the other way when someone else is suffering." The hatchet lowered. Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. The wall she'd built to hold back the rage. The grief, the hopelessness. "My husband died fighting for this country," she whispered. "And a banker stole everything he left behind." "Yes, ma'am." "And nobody did anything." "No, ma'am." Eleanor closed her eyes. She saw Samuel's face, his smile, his gentle hands, the way he'd looked at her on their wedding day, like she was the only woman in the world. She saw him lying in Virginia dirt, bleeding out from a Confederate bullet, dying for a country that would let a banker steal from his widow. When she opened her eyes, something had changed. The fear was still there, but it had company now, a cold, clean rage that burned like winter fire. "Mr. Harlan?" "Ma'am?" "I'm going to build a home in that cave. I'm going to raise my children. And someday, I'm going to make Cornelius Thorne pay for what he did." She met his eyes steadily. "I don't expect help. I don't want pity. But if you know anything else about what Thorne did, I want to hear it." Josiah was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I got some tools at my cabin. Better than what you're carrying. I'll bring them by tomorrow. I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for payment." "Then why help?" The question hung in the cold air between them. Josiah's hand moved unconsciously to his scarred face, touching the ruined skin, like he'd forgotten it was there. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," he said quietly. "And I know what it's like when nobody helps." He turned and walked into the trees without another word. Eleanor watched him disappear, this strange, scarred man who'd appeared from nowhere, with news that changed everything. Then she went back to the cave to wake her children. They had work to do. Josiah Harlan kept his word. He appeared at the cave mouth the next morning, carrying a canvas sack heavy with tools, a draw knife, an auger, a proper saw, hinges and screws wrapped in oilcloth. Eleanor stepped out to meet him, and something twisted in her chest when she saw his face in daylight. The scars were worse than she'd remembered. Angrier. The skin pulled tight across his cheekbone, shiny and mottled pink. He caught her staring and turned his head slightly, hiding the worst of it. "Brought what I said I would." "I see that." Eleanor took the sack from his hands. It weighed more than she expected. "This is too much. I can't." "You can, and you will." Josiah's voice left no room for argument. "Those children of yours need walls before the real cold hits. You got maybe 3 weeks before this mountain turns mean." "I know the weather." "Then you know you can't build fast enough alone." The words hung between them. Eleanor wanted to refuse, wanted to prove she didn't need anyone, didn't need this scarred stranger with his careful eyes and his mysterious past. But Ruth and Benny were inside that cave, shivering under quilts, and pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Fine," she said, "but you teach me. I won't have you doing my work for me." Something flickered across Josiah's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Fair enough." They started on the wall that same hour. Josiah showed her how to choose deadfall, testing the wood with his knife, checking for rot, judging the grain. He showed her how to set wedges properly, how to split logs clean, how to notch them for fitting. His hands moved with practiced ease, but he explained every step, every decision. He treated her like an equal, not a helpless woman playing at men's work. Eleanor found herself watching him more than she should. "You've done this before?" she said halfway through the first log. "Built things, I mean." Josiah's hand stilled on the wedge. "Once." "What happened?" "It burned." The word fell like a stone into still water. Eleanor waited, but Josiah didn't elaborate. He just picked up the hammer and drove the wedge deeper, and the crack of splitting wood ended the conversation. Ruth emerged from the cave an hour later, Benny trailing behind her. The girl stopped short when she saw Josiah. Her eyes went straight to his scars, and her face paled. "Ruth." Eleanor's voice was sharp. "This is Mr. Harlan. He's helping us build." "Ma'am." Josiah touched the brim of his hat without looking up from his work. Ruth recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. I... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's all right. Josiah's voice was flat. Everybody stares. Least you had the decency to feel bad about it. Ruth's cheeks flushed red. She grabbed Benny's hand and pulled him toward the creek before Eleanor could say another word. Eleanor watched them go, then turned to Josiah. That was unkind. It was honest. She's 12 years old. She's never seen... Seen what? Josiah finally looked at her, and his eyes were hard. A monster. A freak. Say it plain, Mrs. McBride. I was going to say she's never seen someone who survived something terrible. Eleanor held his gaze steady. There's a difference. Josiah went still. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind whispered through the junipers. The creek sang its endless song. Then Josiah turned back to his work. The girl can help carry stones for the chimney, the boy too, if he's got the stomach for it. They both do. We'll see. By midday they had the first course of logs in place. Eleanor's shoulders burned, her hands were raw. But the wall was rising solid and real, and something that had been clenched tight in her chest began to loosen. Ruth returned from the creek with a string of questions. How did the notches work? Why these logs and not those? Could she try the saw? Josiah answered each question without looking at her, his voice gruff but patient. By afternoon, Ruth was measuring and marking while Eleanor cut. Benny sat nearby sorting nails by size. His small hands were careful, precise. You're doing good work, son, Josiah said, passing by. Benny looked up with wide eyes. Thank you, sir. It was the first time Eleanor had seen her son smile since they'd left the house. The wall rose faster than Eleanor had dared hope. Knee-high by evening, waist-high by the second day, chest-high by the third. And each day Josiah returned at dawn and worked until dusk without asking for anything in return. On the fourth morning, Eleanor asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Why are you really helping us? Josiah was sharpening the saw blade, running a file along the teeth with practiced strokes. He didn't stop. Told you already. You told me you know what it's like to lose everything. That's not an answer. That's a story with the middle cut out. The file paused. Josiah stared at the blade for a long moment. I had a wife once, he said quietly. And a son, 4 years old. Name was Daniel. Eleanor felt her breath catch. There was a fire. Lamp oil spilled. I was in the barn when it started. Josiah's voice had gone flat mechanical. By the time I got to the house, the whole front was burning. I went in anyway, got halfway up the stairs before the roof came down. His hand moved to his scarred face, touching the ruined skin. Woke up 3 weeks later in a doctor's office in Denver. My wife was dead. My son was dead. And I looked like this. Eleanor couldn't speak, couldn't move. That was 5 years ago, Josiah continued. I came out here because I couldn't stand people looking at me, couldn't stand the pity, couldn't stand being alive when they weren't. He looked at her, and his eyes were empty. You asked why I'm helping. It's because I couldn't save them. And maybe if I help you, I can stop feeling like I should have died in that fire too. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared grief. What was her name? Eleanor asked softly. Your wife. Mary. She was lucky to have you. Josiah's laugh was bitter broken. Lucky I let her burn. You nearly died trying to save her. That's not letting someone burn. That's loving them enough to walk through fire. Josiah stared at her. Something cracked behind his eyes. Something old and frozen beginning to thaw. Before he could respond, Ruth's voice cut through the morning air. Mama, someone's coming? Eleanor spun toward the ridge path. A rider was picking his way down the slope. Even at this distance, she recognized the bay horse, the slouched posture, the glint of a deputy's star. Wade caught her. Josiah moved to stand beside her, and his hand dropped to the knife at his belt. That the deputy who threw you out? Yes. Want me to make him leave? Eleanor shook her head. No, I want to hear what he has to say. Wade rode into the clearing and stopped 20 feet from the cave mouth. His eyes moved from Eleanor to Josiah to the half-built wall, and his expression shifted surprise, then something that might have been relief. Mrs. McBride, didn't expect to find you so settled. What do you want, Deputy? Wade dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. Thorne sent me. He heard rumors you were still in the area, wanted me to check. And tell him what exactly? That you'd moved on, left the territory. Wade's eyes met hers. That's what I'm planning to tell him. Eleanor felt Josiah tense beside her. She put a hand on his arm, a warning. Why would you do that? Because Thorne's been asking questions about this land, about mineral rights and survey claims. Wade glanced at the bluff above them. He thinks there might be gold up here, and if he finds out you're sitting on it, he won't just send me next time. The words hit Eleanor like cold water. Gold. Thorne didn't just want her house. He wanted this land. He'd driven her out, taken everything she had, and now he was coming for the one place she had left. There's no gold here, she said. Doesn't matter if there is or isn't. Matters if Thorne believes there might be. Wade stepped closer, lowering his voice. I can buy you some time. A few weeks, maybe a month. But eventually he's going to send someone else, and they won't be as friendly. Why warn me you work for him? Wade's jaw tightened. I work for the law. Thorne just happens to own the man who pays me. He looked at Josiah. You the trapper who lives up on Miller's Ridge. I am. Then you know these hills better than anyone. If things go bad, you can get her and those children out. Promise me you'll do that. Josiah studied the deputy for a long moment. I promise. Wade nodded once, then mounted his horse. Build fast, Mrs. McBride. Winter's coming, and so is Thorne. He rode back up the ridge without looking back. Eleanor watched him go, her mind racing. Gold. Survey claims. A banker who'd forged papers to steal her home, now hunting for treasure on land that didn't belong to him. We need to finish that wall, she said. Josiah nodded. We need to do more than that. We need to make this place a fortress. They worked through the afternoon with renewed urgency. Ruth carried stones until her arms shook. Benny gathered every scrap of kindling he could find. Eleanor split logs until her vision blurred with exhaustion. And Josiah worked beside her silent and steady, his scarred face grim with purpose. By sunset, the wall stood complete. Eleanor stepped back to look at it. Rough logs stacked in notched gaps, waiting for chinking, but solid. Real. A barrier between her children and the world that wanted to destroy them. We need a door, she said. Tomorrow. Josiah picked up his tools. I'll bring the hinges. You've already given us too much. Not nearly enough. He paused at the edge of the clearing. Get some sleep, Mrs. McBride. Tomorrow's going to be harder. Eleanor. He turned back. My name is Eleanor. If you're going to keep saving my life, you might as well use it. Something softened in Josiah's face. Just for a moment. Eleanor. He repeated like he was tasting the word. Good night, Eleanor. He disappeared into the darkness, and Eleanor stood alone in front of the wall she'd built with her own hands. For the first time since Samuel died, she didn't feel completely alone. The next morning brought visitors. Eleanor was mixing mud for chinking when she heard voices on the ridge path. Not Wade Cotter's measured tone, but women's voices, bright and chattering like creek water over stones. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron. 3 women emerged from the trees. The first was Ida Brennan, the widow who'd brought the quilt. Behind her came 2 others, a younger woman with red hair and freckles, and an older one with silver braids wound around her head like a crown. Mrs. McBride, Ida called out. We've come to help. Eleanor stared at them. Help! Word travels fast in Pinetop Crossing. Ida reached the clearing slightly out of breath. We heard what you're building up here. Heard Thorne's been sniffing around too. Her eyes hardened. That man's taken enough from this town. We won't let him take more. The red-haired woman stepped forward. I'm Sarah Holbrook. My husband runs the general store. I brought salt pork and flour. She held up a cloth-wrapped bundle. The silver-haired woman nodded regally. Agatha Whitmore. I taught school in this town for 30 years before Thorne shut it down. I brought books for your children and needles for mending. Eleanor's throat closed up. She couldn't speak. Now then, Ida said briskly, rolling up her sleeves. Show us what needs doing. They worked together through the morning. Ida and Agatha helped Eleanor pack chinking into the wall gaps, while Sarah played with Ruth and Benny by the creek, teaching them a clapping game that made Benny giggle. It was the first time Eleanor had heard her son laugh in weeks. The town's changing, Ida said quietly, pressing mud into a crack. Thorns pushed too far too often. People are starting to push back. Bah. Pushing back how? Small things for now. Zeke Cole refused to shoe Thorne's horses last week. The Reverend preached a sermon about greed and corruption that everyone knew was aimed at the bank. Ida smiled grimly. Nothing that'll bring Thorne down on its own, but it's a start. Why now? Why not when he was forging papers and stealing homes? Ida was quiet for a moment. Because sometimes it takes one person standing up to remind everyone else they can stand too. You're that person, Eleanor. Whether you meant to be or not. Eleanor thought about that as she worked. One person standing up. She hadn't stood up, she'd been thrown down and simply refused to stay there. Was that the same thing? Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe the result was what counted. Josiah arrived at midday with the hinges and found 4 women working on the cave. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his expression unreadable. Mr. Harlan? Ida called out cheerfully. Come join us. Josiah hesitated. Eleanor could see him calculating too many eyes, too many questions, too much exposure. Go on, she said quietly, walking over to him. They're friends. You trust them. I trust Ida. The others followed her here. That's good enough for me. Josiah looked at the women, then at the wall, then at Eleanor. Something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, but close. All right then. He walked into the clearing, and Eleanor watched Ida's eyes widen at his scars. But the older woman recovered quickly, extending her hand like she greeted burned trappers every day. Ida Brennan. I've heard good things about you, Mr. Harlan. Josiah shook her hand carefully. Can't imagine from who. From people who pay attention. Ida smiled. Now are you going to stand there looking uncomfortable, or are you going to help us hang that door? Josiah blinked. Then slowly one corner of his mouth twitched upward. Yes, ma'am. They hung the door that afternoon. Eleanor had built it herself, 3 wide planks, held together with cross pieces rough but solid. Josiah supervised while she positioned the hinges, boring pilot holes, driving screws with hands that had grown steady through days of hard work. The door hung crooked at first. She planed the bottom edge, adjusted the hinges, tried again. This time it swung true. Ruth stepped forward and pushed it closed. The latch caught with a satisfying click. It works, she breathed. Course it works, Eleanor said. I built it. Benny ran forward and pushed the door open, then closed, then open again, his face glowing. We have a door, he shouted. Mama, we have a real door. Eleanor laughed. Actually laughed, the sound strange and rusty in her throat. We do, baby. We have a door. Ida wiped her eyes with her apron. Would you look at that? A home rising from nothing. But it wasn't nothing, Eleanor thought. It was everything she had left, and it was becoming something more. The women left before sunset, promising to return. Sarah pressed extra flour into Eleanor's hands. Agatha left 3 books and a fierce hug that surprised them both. Ida lingered at the path's edge. Watch yourself, she said quietly. Thorne won't like what's happening here. He won't like it at all. Let him not like it. I'm not afraid of him. You should be. He's done worse than forge papers, Eleanor. Much worse. Ida's face darkened. There was a family 5 years back. The Sullivans. They had land Thorne wanted. One night their barn caught fire. Spread to the house before anyone could stop it. Eleanor went cold. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful. That's all. Just be careful. She walked into the gathering dusk, and Eleanor stood alone with the weight of her words. Fire. Thorne had used fire before. She thought of Josiah's scars, his wife and son. A lamp that spilled, a roof that collapsed. Was it possible? No. She was being paranoid. Josiah's family died in Denver, not Pinetop Crossing. It was a coincidence. A terrible, tragic coincidence. But as she closed her new door and barred it against the night, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that nothing in this town was coincidence anymore. Josiah returned at dawn, and Eleanor met him outside the cave. I need to ask you something. He set down his tools. Ask. Your family. The fire. You said you were in Denver. I was. But before Denver. Where were you before? Josiah's face went blank. The walls came up fast and hard. Why does it matter? Because Ida Brennan told me about a family called Sullivan. They had land Thorne wanted. There was a fire. Eleanor stepped closer. Sound familiar? Josiah didn't move, didn't breathe. Josiah, tell me the truth. The truth. His voice was rough, broken. The truth is, I didn't live in Denver. I lived 30 miles from here in a valley Thorne wanted to buy. I said no. 2 weeks later, my house was burning and my family was dead. The world tilted. Thorne killed them. I can't prove it. Nobody can prove it, but I know. Josiah's hands clenched into fists. I know because after the fire, Thorne sent a man to buy my land. Said he'd give me a fair price, seeing as I didn't need it anymore. Said it was the Christian thing to do. Eleanor felt sick. I almost killed him, Josiah continued. Had my hands around his throat before I came to my senses. Knew if I did it, I'd hang, and Thorne would win anyway. His eyes were distant, lost in memory. So I sold the land for nothing, walked away, came up here to die alone like I deserved. You didn't deserve any of this. Didn't I? I should have seen it coming. Should have protected them. Should have... Stop. Eleanor grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. You didn't kill your family. Cornelius Thorne did. And you've been punishing yourself for his crime ever since. Josiah stared at her. His eyes were wet. I see their faces every night, he whispered. Mary's face, Daniel's face. I see them burning. I know. I see Samuel's face, too. I see him dying in Virginia, and I wasn't even there. Eleanor's own voice cracked. We carry the dead with us, Josiah. That's what it means to love someone. But carrying them doesn't mean we have to die, too. A tear slid down Josiah's scarred cheek. He didn't wipe it away. What do you want from me, Eleanor? I want you to stop hiding. I want you to stop punishing yourself. And I want you to help me take down Cornelius Thorne. She held his gaze. Not just for my family. For yours, too. Josiah was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, he said. All right. Tell me what you need. Eleanor took a deep breath. First, we finish building this home. Then we figure out how to prove Thorne forged those papers. Her eyes hardened. And then we make him pay for every life he's destroyed. Inside the cave, Ruth was teaching Benny his letters by firelight. Outside the wall stood solid, the door hung true, and the chimney waited to be built. And in Eleanor's chest, something new was burning, not grief, not fear, but something fiercer. Hope. Hope and the cold fire of justice. They built the chimney in 4 days. Eleanor worked until her hands bled, stacking stones from the creek bed, mixing mud and clay, building the structure higher and higher along the cave's north wall. Josiah worked beside her, guiding her hands, teaching her to read the stone. "Not that one," he said, pulling a flat rock from her grip. "See how it flakes won't hold the heat. You need solid through and through." "How can you tell?" "Wait. Sound." He tapped the stone with his knuckle, and it rang dull and hollow. "That's a stone that'll crack when the fire gets hot. This one?" He picked up another, tapped it. A clear, bright ring. "This one'll last 100 years." Eleanor took the good stone and set it in place. Ruth appeared at her elbow. "Mama, there's a man watching us." Eleanor's blood went cold. "Where?" "Up on the ridge. He's been there since noon." Josiah was already moving. He grabbed his rifle and climbed the rock shelf with the ease of a man who'd spent years in these mountains. Eleanor pulled Ruth behind the half-built wall. "Take Benny inside. Bar the door." "But Mama—" "Now, Ruth." The girl ran. Eleanor picked up the hatchet and waited. Minutes passed. The wind whispered through the junipers. The creek sang its endless song. Then Josiah came back down, his face grim. Gone. But he left tracks. 2 horses. Heavy boots. Not hunters. Thorne's men. Who else? Josiah checked his rifle. "They're watching, waiting for something." "For what?" "I don't know. But we need to finish this chimney fast. If they come at night, we need fire and warmth to survive." They worked through the afternoon, through the evening, by lamplight when the sun set. Eleanor's muscles screamed. Her back felt like it was breaking, but she kept stacking stones, kept mixing. Mud kept building. By the second night, the chimney reached the ceiling. By the third night, they'd widened the throat and aligned it with the natural crack in the stone. By the fourth night, Eleanor lit the first fire. Smoke rose, wavered. For a terrible moment, it seemed to billow back into the cave. Then it caught the draft and climbed, disappearing into the darkness above. "It works," Eleanor breathed. "Course it works." Josiah almost smiled. "You built it." Ruth and Benny crept close to the fire, their faces glowing in the warm light. For the first time since they'd left their home, they looked safe. Eleanor looked at Josiah across the flames, and something passed between them. Something that didn't need words. They'd done it. They'd built a shelter. They'd built a home. Now they just had to keep it. The first snow came 3 days later. Eleanor woke to silence, the deep, muffled quiet that meant the world had changed overnight. She pushed open the door and found the ground covered in white, the trees heavy with it, the air sharp and clean. Snow. Benny pushed past her, his face alight with wonder. "Mama, it's snowing." "I see that baby." Ruth stepped out more carefully, wrapping her shawl tight. "Will we be warm enough?" "The chimney draws true. The walls are solid. We'll be fine." But Eleanor's eyes moved to the ridge, searching for watchers. She saw nothing but white. Josiah arrived at midday, his coat dusted with snow. "Storm's coming," he said without preamble. "Big one. Saw the signs this morning, pressure dropping, birds gone quiet, sky turning that color." He looked at the cave. "You need to stock up. Wood, water, food. Enough for a week at least." "A week? Maybe more. These mountain storms don't play nice." They worked fast. Ruth gathered kindling, while Benny sorted it by size. Eleanor hauled water from the creek in the Dutch oven, and the spider filling every container they had. Josiah split logs, his axe rising and falling in a steady rhythm. By evening, the cave was stocked. Wood stacked high, water ready, food rationed and counted. "You should stay," Eleanor said, as Josiah prepared to leave. He stopped. "What?" "The storm. It's dangerous to travel. You should stay here until it passes." "I've weathered worse." "That's not what I asked." Their eyes met. The fire crackled between them. "Eleanor, you've spent 5 years punishing yourself, living alone in these mountains because you think you deserve to suffer." She stepped closer. "You don't. And I don't want you dying in a blizzard because you're too stubborn to accept help." Josiah's jaw tightened. "It ain't proper." A man staying with a widow and her children. Proper died when Thorn threw us out of our home. Stay, Josiah. Please. The word hung in the air. Josiah looked at the door, at the darkness beyond, at the snow already falling faster. All right, he said quietly. I'll stay. That night, the storm hit. It came with a sound like a freight train, a roar that built and built until it seemed the whole mountain was screaming. Wind slammed against the bluff, found every crack in the wall, howled through every gap in the chinking. Benny pressed his face into Eleanor's shoulder. Mama, I'm scared. I know, baby. It's all right. We're safe. But her eyes met Josiah's across the fire, and she saw her own fear reflected there. This was no ordinary storm. The night stretched endless. Snow piled against the door, pressed against the wood, seeking entry. The fire burned hot, but cold crept in from every direction. Halfway through, Benny started coughing. At first it was nothing, a tickle, a wheeze. But it grew worse, deeper, until the boy was doubled over, his small body racking with each breath. Josiah. Eleanor's voice shook. Something's wrong. He was beside her in an instant, his hand on Benny's forehead. He's burning up. The smoke, there's too much smoke. Eleanor looked at the chimney. The fire still burned, but smoke was backing up, filling the cave, stinging her eyes. It's blocked, Josiah said. Snow or ice in the throat. I have to clear it. You can't go out there. If I don't, we'll choke. He was already pulling on his coat. Keep the children near the door. Open it a crack for fresh air. Josiah. He cupped her face in his rough hands. I'll come back. I promise. Then he was gone, pushing through the door into white chaos. Eleanor dragged the children to the doorway, cracking it open just enough to let clean air in. Benny's coughing eased, but his forehead still burned with fever. Mama, Ruth's voice was thin. What if he doesn't come back? He'll come back. But what if he will come back? Eleanor's voice broke. He has to. Minutes passed. The storm raged. No sign of Josiah. Eleanor felt terror clawing at her chest. She imagined him out there, frozen, lost, dying alone because she'd asked him to stay. Ruth, watch your brother. Mama, no. But Eleanor was already pushing through the door. The cold hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe the snow, driving horizontal, white on white on white. Josiah! Her voice was swallowed by the wind. She felt for the cave wall, used it to guide herself. Her hands were numb in seconds. Her face burned with cold. She found the rock shelf, climbed it on hands and knees, the wind trying to tear her loose. At the top she saw him. Josiah was slumped against the chimney, his hands still gripping the poker he'd used to clear the blockage. He wasn't moving. Josiah! Eleanor scrambled toward him, shook him hard. Wake up, Josiah! His eyes fluttered open. Eleanor! His voice was weak. What are you? You shouldn't be. Shut up. We're going back. Now. She hauled him to his feet, his arm over her shoulders, half dragging him across the rock shelf. The wind screamed. The snow blinded her. She found the edge, found handholds, climbed down with Josiah's weight threatening to pull them both into the darkness. Somehow, she never knew how they made it back to the door. Ruth had it open, her face white with terror. They fell inside. Ruth slammed the door closed, barred its stuffed rags along the bottom. Eleanor knelt over Josiah, stripping off his frozen coat, chafing his hands, pulling him close to the fire. Don't you dare die, she whispered. Don't you dare. His eyes found hers. You came for me. Of course I did. Nobody's ever... He stopped, swallowed. Nobody's come for me. Not since the fire. Well, someone's coming for you now. Every time. You hear me? Every time. She held him close, and the fire burned warm, and outside the storm raged, but inside, they were alive. The storm lasted 2 more days. They took turns sleeping, keeping the fire fed, watching over Benny. The boy's fever broke on the second morning, and Eleanor wept with relief. Josiah recovered slowly. His hands were frostbitten, the tips of 2 fingers swollen and black. "Might lose them," he said, examining the damage with clinical calm. "No." Eleanor's voice was fierce. "You won't. I won't let you." She soaked his hands in warm water, wrapped them in clean cloth, changed the dressings 3 times a day. By the 3rd morning, the color was returning. "You saved my hands," Josiah said quietly. "You saved our lives. We're even." "We ain't anywhere close to even." Something in his voice made Eleanor look up. His eyes were on her face, soft in a way she'd never seen before. "Josiah, I've been dead 5 years, Eleanor. Walking around breathing air, but dead inside." He reached out with his bandaged hand, touched her cheek. "You brought me back. You and those children. You gave me a reason to keep going." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "I can't promise you anything," she whispered. "I can't. Samuel's only been gone. I ain't asking for promises. I'm just telling you the truth." Josiah's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Whatever happens with Thorn, whatever comes next, I want you to know you matter to me. More than I got words for." Eleanor closed her eyes. She felt the warmth of his hand, the steadiness of his presence. For the first time in 14 years, she let herself want something. "You matter to me too," she said. "More than I thought I could ever feel again." They sat together by the fire, his hand in hers, and the storm howled outside, but inside was silence and warmth, and something that felt like hope. The morning after the storm, Zeke Cole rode up to the cave. Eleanor met him at the door, and one look at his face told her something was wrong. "Thorn's moving," Zeke said out of breath. "He's got a surveyor coming from Denver. Claims this whole ridge is part of the original land grant from your husband's property. Says he's got papers proving it." "More forgeries?" "Most likely. But papers are papers, Mrs. McBride. Judge won't look past them without proof they're fake." Eleanor felt the cold settle into her bones. "What do we do?" Josiah stepped up beside her. "We find proof. Thorn's been sloppy, arrogant. Men like that leave trails." Zeke nodded. "There's a clerk at the land office in town. Name's Patterson. Word is Thorn paid him to file false surveys 5 years back. If we can get Patterson to talk." "Why would he?" Eleanor asked. "Thorn owns him." "Because Patterson's wife is dying, and Thorn refused to advance him money for the doctor." Zeke's eyes hardened. "A man who won't help a dying woman ain't worth protecting. Patterson knows that now." "I'll go," Josiah said. "No." Eleanor grabbed his arm. "You go into town, Thorn will know. He'll have you arrested or worse." "Then what?" "I'll go," Ruth said from the doorway. Everyone turned. The girl stood straight, her jaw set. "Nobody watches a child. I can get into the land office, talk to Patterson, get whatever he'll give us." "Absolutely not." Eleanor's voice was sharp. "It's too dangerous." "Mama." Ruth walked forward, her eyes steady. "You taught me to be strong. You taught me we don't give up. Let me help. If Thorn finds out—" "He won't. I'll be careful." Ruth took her mother's hands. "I can do this. Let me do this." Eleanor looked at her daughter, this girl who'd grown up so fast, who'd lost her father and her home and never once complained. This girl who was becoming a woman right before her eyes. "Zeke will take you," she said finally. "You don't leave his sight. You get the papers, and you come straight back. Understand?" Ruth's face broke into a fierce smile. "Yes, ma'am." They left within the hour. Eleanor watched them go, her heart in her throat. "She's brave," Josiah said quietly. "She's 12 years old. She shouldn't have to be brave." "No, but she is anyway. That's your doing." Eleanor didn't answer. She stood at the cave mouth and prayed to God, to Samuel, to anyone who might be listening, that her daughter would come home safe. The waiting was the worst part. Eleanor tried to work, but her hands shook. She tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. She paced the cave like a caged animal, counting minutes, imagining disasters. Josiah watched her with worried eyes, but said nothing. Benny, still weak from his fever, picked up on the tension. "Where's Ruth?" "She's helping Mr. Cole. She'll be back soon." "Promise." Eleanor knelt down, cupped her son's face. "I promise." It was past noon when she heard hoofbeats. She ran outside Josiah right behind her. Ruth came down the ridge path on Zeke's horse, her face flushed with triumph. "I got them." She held up a leather satchel. "Patterson gave me everything. Surveys, land grants, letters. Mama Thorne threatened to burn his house if he didn't cooperate. It's all here. Everything." Eleanor caught her daughter as she slid off the horse, held her tight. "You did it," she whispered. "You brave, brilliant girl." But Zeke's face was grim. "There's more," he said. "Thorne knows Ruth was at the land office. Someone saw her leave. He's coming, Mrs. McBride. He's coming tonight." The words hit like a hammer blow. "How many men?" "Don't know. But Thorne was gathering every gun he owns. This ain't going to be a legal fight anymore." Josiah's jaw tightened. "Then we make a stand." "Against how many? 5-10? "Doesn't matter. We run, now we lose everything." Josiah looked at Eleanor. "You wanted to take Thorne down. This is our chance." Eleanor's mind raced. Her children were here. Her home was here. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for. Running meant giving up. Standing meant risking her children's lives. Ruth. Benny. She turned to her children. "Go to Mrs. Brennan's. Follow the back trail by the creek. Don't stop until you reach town." "No." Ruth grabbed her arm. "I'm not leaving you. You have to. Those papers have to reach the sheriff in Denver. Zeke, can you get them there?" "I can try." "Then go. Now. All of you." "Eleanor," Josiah started. "I'm staying." She cut him off. "This is my home, my fight. But my children will not die here." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "Mama, please." Eleanor pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "You're the bravest girl I know. Now be brave enough to go. Protect your brother. Get those papers to Denver." She pulled back, looked into her daughter's eyes. "I love you. I love you more than anything in this world. Now run." Ruth hesitated one more moment. Then she grabbed Benny's hand, took the satchel from Zeke, and ran. Eleanor watched them disappear into the trees, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. Then she turned to Josiah. "How do we do this?" "We make them come to us. The cave's defensible. One entrance. Good sight lines." He checked his rifle. "I've got maybe 20 rounds. You?" "The hatchet, the axe, Samuel's knife. Then we make every shot count." They worked fast, building a barricade just inside the door, stacking logs and stones to provide cover. Eleanor filled every container with water in case of fire. Josiah positioned himself where he had a clear line of sight to the path. The sun set. Darkness fell. They waited. Eleanor sat with her back against the wall, the hatchet in her hands. Her heart pounded. Her mouth was dry. "Josiah." "Yeah. If we don't make it, we'll make it. But if we don't—" She swallowed. "Thank you. For everything." He reached over, took her hand. "When this is over," he said quietly, "I'm going to ask you something. Something I've been wanting to ask since I first saw you standing outside this cave with a hatchet in your hand." "What kind of something?" "The kind that needs an answer." His eyes found hers in the darkness. "But first we survive. Deal." Eleanor's heart stuttered. "Deal." The first shot came at midnight. It shattered the silence, splintered against the cave wall above their heads. "Down!" Josiah pulled Eleanor behind the barricade. "They're at the tree line, 50 yards out." Another shot, then another. Eleanor's ears rang. "Josiah Harlan." A voice echoed from the darkness, oily confident. "Come on out. This don't need to get ugly." "Thorne." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "I know you're in there," Thorne continued. "You and that McBride woman. The children ran smart of you, but running won't save them. They'll never reach Denver." "He's lying," Josiah muttered. "Trying to break us." "Give me the papers and walk away. Both of you. I'll let you live." Eleanor grabbed Josiah's arm. "The children have the papers. He doesn't know." "He will when he searches the cave." Josiah raised his rifle, sighted. "I count 4 men, maybe 5. That's too many." "Then I better not miss." He fired. A scream from the darkness. "One down," Josiah said, reloading. 4 to go." The return fire was immediate, a barrage that sent splinters flying from the door that cracked against the stone and ricocheted into darkness. Eleanor pressed herself flat, her heart hammering. This was it. This was how she would die, not of cold or hunger, but in a cave she'd built with her own hands, defending a home that wasn't even hers anymore. But she'd be damned if she died easy. She grabbed a burning log from the fire. "What are you doing?" Josiah hissed. "Making them see in the dark." She threw the log through the door crack. It landed in the snow, hissing, casting wild shadows. In the light, she saw them 4 men crouched behind trees, rifles raised, and behind them, sitting on his horse, like he was watching a play, Cornelius Thorne. Josiah fired again. A second man went down. "Fall back!" someone shouted. "Fall back!" The men retreated into darkness. Eleanor's chest heaved. "We got 2. "Won't stop him. Thorne doesn't lose. Not ever." As if in answer, a new sound reached them, the crackle of flames. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Fire. Thorne was setting fire to the juniper bushes at the cave mouth. "He's trying to smoke us out," Josiah said, "or burn us alive." The smoke was already building, creeping into the cave, stinging Eleanor's eyes. She thought of Mary and Daniel Harlan. She thought of the Sullivan family. She thought of every person Cornelius Thorne had burned. She would not be next. "The back?" she gasped. "Is there another way out?" "No." Josiah stopped. His eyes went wide. "The chimney, the crack in the ceiling, it goes through." "Can we fit?" "Maybe. If we—" A bullet slammed into the barricade inches from Eleanor's head. "Go!" Josiah shoved her toward the chimney. "I'll hold them off." "I'm not leaving you. You're going up that chimney and you're getting out. Those children need their mother." "And what do you need?" Josiah grabbed her face, kissed her hard. "I need you to live," he said against her mouth. "Now go." He pushed her toward the chimney and turned back to the door, rifle raised. Eleanor climbed. The chimney was narrow, the stones slick with soot. She wedged herself in, pushing with her feet, pulling with her hands, her lungs burning from smoke. Below, she heard gunfire. Josiah's rifle. Return shots. Then silence. No. No, no, no. She climbed faster. Desperate, the crack in the ceiling getting closer. Her hand found open air. She pulled herself through, tumbled out onto the rock shelf, gasping. The cave below was engulfed in smoke. Fire licked at the door, and somewhere in that hell, Josiah was fighting alone. Eleanor grabbed a loose stone. Then she climbed down the bluff and circled around. Thorne's men were focused on the cave entrance, their backs to the trees. She moved silent as a ghost. The first man never saw her coming. The stone hit his skull with a crack that echoed off the bluff. He dropped. The second man turned too late. Eleanor's hatchet caught him in the shoulder, and his scream brought the third running. But Josiah had heard too. He burst from the smoke, bloody and burned but alive, his rifle swinging like a club. The third man went down. That left Thorne. Eleanor turned. The banker sat on his horse, his face pale in the firelight. "Mrs. McBride." His voice was steady, but his eyes were wild. "This doesn't have to—" "You killed my husband." Eleanor walked toward him. "You stole my land. You burned innocent people alive. I'm a businessman. I do what's necessary. So do I. She grabbed the horse's bridle. Thorn went for his pistol, but Josiah was faster. The rifle shot echoed off the bluff, and Cornelius Thorn fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder, screaming. Eleanor stood over him. "You're going to prison," she said. "You're going to lose everything, and you're going to spend the rest of your miserable life knowing a widow and a scarred trapper brought you down." Thorn's face twisted with hatred. "You'll never prove—" "I already have." Eleanor smiled. "My daughter's on her way to Denver right now with every forged paper, every false survey, every piece of evidence you thought you'd buried. It's over, Thorn. You're done." The fight went out of him. He sagged against the snow blood spreading beneath him, and for the first time, Cornelius Thorn looked like what he truly was, a small, broken man. Eleanor turned away. Josiah caught her as her legs gave out. "Easy," he murmured. "I've got you. You're alive. Told you I'd survive." She laughed or sobbed, she couldn't tell which, and held him tight. Behind them, the cave burned. 5 years of Thorn's crimes lay bleeding in the snow, and somewhere in the darkness, headed toward Denver, her children carried the evidence that would change everything. The fire burned through the night. Eleanor watched from the ridge, Josiah's arm around her shoulders, as everything she'd built turned to ash and ember. The wall she'd stacked log by log. The door she'd hung with bleeding hands. The chimney that had taken 4 days of back-breaking labor. Gone. All of it gone. "We can rebuild," Josiah said quietly. "I know. It's just wood and stone. What matters is still here." Eleanor leaned into him. Her body ached. Her lungs burned from smoke. But he was right. The cave still stood. The structure was damaged, not destroyed, and her children were safe. That was what mattered. "Thorn's men," she said. "The ones still alive. What do we do with them?" "Tie them up. Leave them for the marshal." Josiah's voice hardened. "Thorn too. Let the law sort him out." They bound the survivors with rope from Josiah's pack, 3 men wounded and beaten, their fight gone out of them. Thorn lay where he'd fallen, his shoulder wound sluggish with blood, his eyes full of hate. "You'll hang for this," he spat, as Eleanor tightened the knots around his wrists. "Both of you. Assault on a respected citizen. Attempted murder. Save it for the judge." Eleanor stood over him, and something cold settled in her chest. "You murdered Josiah's family. You stole my land. You've terrorized this town for years. The only one hanging will be you. You have no proof. My daughter's carrying proof to Denver right now. Every forged paper, every false survey, every letter you were stupid enough to write." Eleanor smiled, and it wasn't kind. "You should have burned your records, Thorn. That's what smart criminals do." For the first time, fear flickered in Thorn's eyes. Eleanor turned away. She was done with him. Dawn came gray and cold. The fire had burned down to smoldering ruins, but the cave itself remained blackened, smoke-damaged, but standing. Eleanor walked through the wreckage, cataloging what could be saved. The Dutch oven buried under debris but intact. Her sewing kit somehow untouched. The quilts, 2 of them at least singed but usable. And Samuel's letter. She found it where it had fallen during her escape, the paper charred at the edges, but the words still legible. "My dearest Ellie." Eleanor pressed it to her heart and wept. Josiah found her there, kneeling in the ash, sobbing like she hadn't sobbed since the day Samuel died. He didn't speak. He just sat beside her, his burned hands gentle on her back, and let her cry. When the tears finally stopped, Eleanor looked at him. "I thought I'd lost everything again." "I know." "I can't lose anything else, Josiah. I can't." "You won't." He cupped her face, tilted it toward him. "You hear me? You won't lose anything else. I'll make sure of it." "How can you promise that?" "Because I'm not going anywhere. Not ever again. He kissed her forehead, soft and tender, and Eleanor felt something crack open inside her. Something she'd kept locked away since the day they buried Samuel's empty coffin. Hope. Real hope. The kind that hurt because it was so fragile. "We need to get to town," she said finally. "Find out if the children made it." "Can you walk?" "I can do whatever I have to do." They left Thorne and his men tied to trees with enough slack to survive but not escape. Zeke Cole would send someone to collect them. For now, Eleanor had more important concerns. Her children. The walk to Pinetop Crossing took 3 hours. Eleanor's legs burned. Her lungs ached, but she kept moving one foot in front of the other, Josiah steady beside her. They reached town just before noon. The first person they saw was Ida Brennan running down the main street with her skirts hitched up around her knees. "Eleanor." "Thank God." Ida grabbed her hands. "The children, they made it. They're at my house. They're safe." Eleanor's knees buckled. Josiah caught her, held her upright. "Safe," she whispered. "They're safe." Ruth got the papers to the telegraph office, sent word to Denver before Thorne's men could stop her. The marshal's on his way. Ida's face was flushed with triumph. "It's over, Eleanor. It's really over." But it wasn't over. Not yet. Eleanor found her children at Ida's house huddled together on a worn settee. Ruth's face was pale, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Benny slept with his head in his sister's lap, his small body twitching with dreams. "Mama!" Ruth leaped up as Eleanor came through the door. "Mama, you're alive!" Eleanor caught her daughter, held her so tight she thought they might fuse together. "I'm alive. We're all alive." "I was so scared." Ruth's voice broke. "When we heard the shots, I wanted to go back. Mr. Cole wouldn't let me. He said you'd want us to keep going to get the papers through. But I wanted to go back, Mama. I wanted—" "You did exactly right." Eleanor pulled back, looked into her daughter's eyes. "You were brave. You saved us all." Ruth's face crumpled. The strong, steady girl who'd carried them through so much finally let herself be a child again, sobbing in her mother's arms. Benny woke to the sound of crying. His eyes found Eleanor's face, and his whole body seemed to light up. "Mama!" He launched himself at her, and Eleanor held both her children, breathing them in, feeling the solid weight of them against her. This was what she'd fought for. This was what mattered. Josiah stood in the doorway watching. His expression was soft, unguarded. "Mr. Harlan." Ruth lifted her head. "You kept your promise. You kept Mama safe." "Your Mama kept herself safe. I just helped a little." Ruth studied him for a moment. Then she crossed the room and did something Eleanor never expected. She hugged him. Josiah went rigid with surprise. His hands hovered awkwardly, unsure. "Thank you," Ruth whispered. "Thank you for not leaving her." Slowly, carefully, Josiah's arms came down around the girl. "I won't leave," he said quietly. "Not ever." Eleanor watched them, her heart so full it hurt. Maybe, just maybe, they could be a family again. The marshal arrived from Denver 3 days later. His name was Thomas Garrett, a hard-faced man with gray in his beard and steel in his eyes. He rode into Pinetop Crossing with 4 deputies and a reputation for honesty that even Thorne's money couldn't buy. "Mrs. McBride." He tipped his hat as Eleanor met him on Ida's porch. "I've reviewed the documents your daughter provided. They're damning. Damning enough to convict, damning enough to hang." Garrett's face was grim. "Forgery, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and that's before we get to the Harlan family fire. The witness statements are piling up. Seems like half this town has a story about Cornelius Thorne. They were afraid to talk before. They're not afraid now, thanks to you." Garrett pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I have a warrant for Thorne's arrest on federal charges. He'll be tried in Denver, not here. No chance of a bought jury." Eleanor felt tension she'd been carrying for weeks begin to release. "And my land, my home." The foreclosure was based on forged documents. It's void. Your property is yours again, free and clear." Garrett paused. "Though I understand you've been living elsewhere." "I've been living in a cave, building a home with my own hands." "So I heard." Something like respect flickered in Garrett's eyes. "The original property or the cave, the choice is yours. Either way, you own it." Eleanor thought of the cabin she'd shared with Samuel, the memories in every room, the ghost of a life that was gone. Then she thought of the cave, the wall she'd built, the chimney she'd raised, the home she'd created from nothing. "The cave," she said. "The ridgeland. That's mine now. I'll file the claim myself." Garrett tipped his hat again and rode off to collect thorn from the tree where he'd spent 3 cold days learning what it felt like to be powerless. Eleanor watched him go, and for the first time in months, she let herself smile. The town came together that afternoon. Word had spread about the fight at the cave, about Thorne's arrest, about the evidence that would bring him down. People Eleanor had never met appeared at Ida's door with food, with supplies, with offers of help. Sarah Holbrook brought blankets and a winter coat that had belonged to her late mother. She would have wanted someone brave to wear it. Agatha Whitmore brought books, real school books, and a promise to teach Ruth and Benny their letters proper. Education doesn't stop for hardship. If anything, that's when it matters most. Zeke Cole brought something else entirely. "Found this in Thorne's office," he said, handing Eleanor a leather folder. "Deputy Cotter helped me look. Thought you'd want to see it." Eleanor opened the folder. Inside was a letter. Samuel's handwriting, dated March 1864. "To whoever finds this after my death." Her hands trembled. "If I don't come home from this war, know that Cornelius Thorne is a liar and a thief. He tried to make me sign papers transferring my land to his bank. I refused. He threatened my family, but I would not bend. Ellie, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better. I'm sorry I had to leave. But know that I loved you more than anything in this world, and I believe in you. Whatever comes, you're strong enough to face it. All my love forever." Samuel. Eleanor couldn't breathe. Samuel had known. He'd known about Thorne, known about the danger, and he'd left a record just in case. "Where did you find this?" "Hidden compartment in Thorne's desk. Seems like he took it after Samuel shipped out. Kept it as insurance maybe, or a trophy." Zeke's face twisted with disgust. "Man's a snake. Always was." "Samuel wrote this for me." Eleanor's voice cracked. "He wrote this 14 years ago, and I'm just seeing it now." "He believed in you," Josiah said quietly. "Even then, he knew you'd fight." Eleanor traced Samuel's handwriting with her finger. "You're strong enough to face it." "Yes," she whispered. "I am." That night, Eleanor found Josiah standing outside Ida's house, staring up at the stars. "Can't sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Haven't slept proper in 5 years. Don't expect that to change overnight." The nightmares. Every night. He was quiet for a moment. "I see the fire. I hear Daniel calling for me. I try to reach him, but I never can." Eleanor took his hand. His scars felt rough against her palm. "You saved us," she said. "Me and my children. Whatever you couldn't do 5 years ago, you made up for it now." "Doesn't work like that. Can't trade one family for another." "No, but you can choose to keep living. You can choose to let yourself heal." She stepped closer. "You can choose to love again." Josiah turned to face her. In the moonlight, his scars looked silver, almost beautiful. "I don't know how," he said. "I forgot." "Then let me teach you." She kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, two broken people reaching for each other in the dark. But then Josiah's arms came around her, and the kiss deepened, and Eleanor felt something she hadn't felt in 14 years. Whole. She felt whole. "Eleanor." Josiah pulled back, breathing hard. "I need to tell you something." "What?" I love you. I know it's too fast. I know you're still grieving, but I can't." She kissed him again, cutting off his words. "I love you too," she said against his mouth. "God help me, I love you too." They stood there in the cold, holding each other, and the stars wheeled overhead, and the world felt new. The trial began 2 weeks later in Denver. Eleanor made the journey with Josiah, Ruth, and Benny, riding in a wagon lent by Zeke Cole. The roads were rough, frozen solid in places, but they made good time. Denver was bigger than Eleanor remembered. Louder, overwhelming after weeks in the quiet of the mountains. But she held her head high and walked into the federal courthouse like she owned it. Cornelius Thorne sat at the defendant's table, his arm in a sling, his face gaunt from weeks in a cell. He looked older, smaller. The arrogance that had defined him was crumbling, replaced by something desperate. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Eleanor didn't look away. "You tried to destroy me," her gaze said. "You failed." The prosecution called witness after witness. Zeke Cole testified about Samuel's refusal to sign Thorne's papers. Patterson, the land office clerk, broke down in tears as he confessed to filing false surveys. Ida Brennan spoke about the Sullivan fire, the whispered rumors everyone had been too afraid to voice. And then Josiah took the stand. Eleanor watched him walk to the witness box, his back straight, his scarred face visible to the entire courtroom. She saw people flinch, saw them whisper behind their hands. Josiah didn't care. "State your name for the record." "Josiah Harlan." "Mr. Harlan, can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" "He murdered my family." The courtroom went silent. 5 years ago, I owned land in Miller's Valley. Thorne wanted to buy it. I refused. 2 weeks later, my house burned down with my wife and son inside. Josiah's voice was steady, but his hands gripped the rail white-knuckled. "I tried to save them. I nearly died trying. Thorne sent a man to buy my land the day after the fire. Said he was doing me a kindness." "Do you have proof that Mr. Thorne was responsible for the fire?" "I have the letter he sent me afterward, thanking me for being reasonable, saying he hoped there were no hard feelings about the unfortunate accident." Josiah's eyes found Thorne. "Men don't write letters like that unless they've got something to hide." The prosecutor introduced the letter as evidence. Eleanor watched the jury's faces shift from skepticism to horror to cold, hard anger. Thorne's lawyer tried to object, tried to discredit, tried every trick in the book. It didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses were credible. And Cornelius Thorne had made too many enemies to find anyone willing to lie for him now. When Eleanor took the stand, she told her story simply: the foreclosure, the forged papers, the cave, the attack. "Mrs. McBride," the prosecutor asked, "what would you like to say to the defendant?" Eleanor looked at Thorne. "You took my home. You stole from my dead husband. You tried to kill me and the man I love." She paused. "But you didn't break me. You didn't break any of us. And when you're rotting in prison, I want you to remember that. A widow with nothing beat you. A scarred trapper beat you. A 12-year-old girl carrying papers through a blizzard beat you. You lost Thorne. You lost to people you thought were beneath you." Thorne's face went purple with rage. He started to rise from his seat. "Sit down, Mr. Thorne." The judge's voice cracked like a whip. "One more outburst and I'll have you gagged." Thorne sat. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. "Guilty on all counts." The words rang through the courtroom like a bell. Eleanor grabbed Josiah's hand, squeezed hard. "Cornelius Thorne, you are hereby sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. May God have mercy on your soul." Thorne screamed. He fought the guards as they dragged him away, cursing, spitting, promising revenge. Eleanor didn't watch. She was looking at her children, Ruth crying with relief, Benny confused, but smiling because everyone else was smiling. She was looking at Josiah, who had tears streaming down his scarred cheeks. It's over, he whispered. It's really over. Yes. Eleanor touched his face. Now we can start living. They left Denver the next morning. The ride home was easier somehow, lighter. Eleanor found herself laughing at Benny's jokes, singing along when Ruth started an old hymn she remembered from church. Even Josiah hummed along, his voice rough but true. What happens now? Ruth asked as they crossed into familiar territory. We rebuild, Eleanor said. The cave needs work. The wall needs fixing. We've got a lot of hard months ahead. But we'll be together. Always. Ruth smiled, really smiled for the first time since they'd left their old home. Good, that's all that matters. They reached Pinetop Crossing at sunset. Half the town was waiting for them. Ida Brennan at the front, Sarah Holbrook and Agatha Whitmore beside her, Zeke Cole, standing with his arms crossed and a grin on his weathered face. Welcome home, Ida called out. We've got news. What kind of news? The kind where the whole town got together and did something about that cave of yours. Ida's eyes sparkled. Go see. Go on. Eleanor looked at Josiah, confused. They rode up to the ridge and stopped. The cave was transformed. The burned wall had been rebuilt, not just rebuilt, but improved. Solid logs, tight chinking a door that hung true. New shutters flanked the entrance. A proper woodshed stood nearby, already stocked with split logs. And above the door, carved into a wooden plank, were words that made Eleanor's heart stop. McBride Hollow. They renamed it, Josiah said quietly. The whole town. They voted to call this place McBride Hollow instead of Widow's Hollow. But I'm still a widow. No. Josiah dismounted, walked to her, took her hands. You're Eleanor McBride, mother, builder, fighter. You're the woman who stood up when everyone else bowed down. He pulled something from his pocket, a simple ring worn with age. This was my mother's. She gave it to Mary, and Mary wore it till the day she died. I've been carrying it ever since, not knowing why. Eleanor's breath caught. Now I know why. Josiah went down on one knee. Eleanor McBride, will you marry me? Will you let me be part of this family you've built? Will you let me love you for whatever time we've got left? Ruth gasped. Benny tugged at his sister's sleeve, asking what was happening. Eleanor looked at the ring, at Josiah's scarred, hopeful face, at the home that waited behind him. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Josiah's face broke into a smile, a real smile, the first she'd ever seen from him. He slid the ring onto her finger, and Eleanor McBride, who had lost everything and built it back again, finally let herself believe in happy endings. The ring felt strange on Eleanor's finger. Not wrong, never wrong, just unfamiliar. She kept touching it as they walked toward the rebuilt cave, running her thumb over the worn silver band that had belonged to Josiah's mother, then to Mary, and now to her. You're going to wear a groove in it, Josiah said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I'm not used to wearing jewelry. You don't have to wear it if... I want to. Eleanor stopped, turned to face him. I want to wear it every day for the rest of my life. I'm just getting used to the weight. The weight of the ring, or the weight of what it means? Trust Josiah to ask the hard question. Both, she admitted. I never thought I'd marry again. After Samuel died, I told myself that part of my life was over, that I'd had my chance at love, and asking for more would be greedy. And now? Now I think maybe we get more than one chance. Maybe love doesn't run out just because we've used it before. Josiah pulled her close. His arms felt like home. Mary would have liked you, he said quietly. She would have said you were too stubborn for your own good, but she would have liked you. I think Samuel would have liked you too. He always respected men who didn't give up. They stood there for a moment, holding each other, honoring the ghosts between them. Then Benny's voice shattered the silence. Mama, there's a cat in the woodshed. Eleanor laughed, a real laugh, free and full. We better go see about this cat. The cat was a scrawny orange thing, with one torn ear and suspicious eyes. Benny had cornered it behind the woodpile and was trying to coax it out with a piece of dried fish. Can we keep it, Mama, please? That's not our decision alone anymore. Eleanor looked at Josiah. What do you think? Josiah crouched down, studied the cat with the same careful attention he gave everything. Looks like a good mouser. Could use one with winter stores to protect. He glanced at Benny. But if we keep it, you're responsible. Feeding, watering, making sure it doesn't get into trouble. Benny's face lit up like sunrise. I promise I'll take the best care of him ever. Him. Ruth appeared in the woodshed doorway. How do you know it's a him? Because he looks like a him. I'm going to call him Samuel. The name hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Josiah's hand found hers, squeezed gently. That's a fine name, he said. Your pa would be honored. Benny beamed and went back to coaxing the cat. Samuel the cat out from behind the woodpile. Ruth caught Eleanor's eye. You all right, Mama? I'm all right, baby. More than all right. And she was. For the first time in 14 years, she truly was. The wedding was set for spring. Eleanor wanted to wait, wanted to make sure this wasn't grief talking, wasn't loneliness wearing the mask of love. Josiah agreed without argument. He'd waited 5 years already. A few more months wouldn't kill him. But winter had other plans. The fever came in January. It started with Benny a cough, a temperature nothing unusual for a child in winter. But within 2 days, he was burning up, delirious, calling for his father in his sleep. Samuel, he moaned, thrashing under the quilts. Papa, don't leave me. Eleanor pressed cool cloths to his forehead, her hands shaking. I'm here, baby. Mama's here. He's getting worse. Ruth's voice was tight with fear. Mama, what do? We keep him cool, keep him hydrated, keep praying. But prayer felt hollow when her son's skin burned like fire. Josiah rode to town for the doctor. He was gone for hours that stretched like years while Eleanor watched her youngest child slip further away. When Josiah finally returned, he wasn't alone. Mrs. McBride. Dr. Harrison stepped into the cave, his face grave. Let me see the boy. He examined Benny with careful hands, listening to his chest, checking his pulse, peering into his eyes. Lung fever, he said finally. Bad case. He needs to be somewhere warmer, cleaner. That stove smoke isn't helping his breathing. We have nowhere else to go. Then we make this place work. Harrison opened his bag. I'm going to need hot water, clean cloth, and someone to help me. I'll help, Ruth said immediately. No. Eleanor stood. You stay with your brother. Talk to him. Keep him anchored. She met Harrison's eyes. Tell me what to do. They worked through the night. Harrison showed Eleanor how to make a steam tent to ease Benny's breathing, how to mix the medicine bitter herbs that made the boy gag but brought his fever down degree by precious degree, how to position him so his lungs could drain. Josiah kept the fire burning, kept the water hot, kept watch at the door for anything that might help. By morning, Benny's fever had broken. Eleanor collapsed beside his bed, exhausted beyond words, and wept. He's going to be all right, Harrison said, packing his bag. Another day or two of rest, plenty of fluids, and he'll be running around causing trouble again. Thank you. I don't know how to. You can thank me by taking care of yourself too, Mrs. McBride. You won't be any use to these children if you work yourself into the grave. After Harrison left, Josiah sat down beside Eleanor. You saved him, he said quietly. The doctor saved him. The doctor gave instructions. You did the work. Josiah took her hand. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, Eleanor. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Eleanor leaned into him, too tired to argue. I thought I was going to lose him. I know. I thought the same thing. Josiah's voice caught. Watching you with him, seeing that fear in your eyes, it reminded me of Mary. The night Daniel got sick. She sat up with him just like you did, fighting for every breath. What happened? He got better, recovered completely. A bitter laugh. Only to die 6 months later in a fire I couldn't stop. Eleanor lifted her head, looked at him. Josiah, that fire wasn't your fault. I know, I've told myself that 1,000 times, but knowing something and believing it are different things. Then let me believe it for you. Let me carry that weight until you're strong enough to set it down. She touched his scarred face. That's what family does. We carry each other. Josiah's eyes glistened. Family, he repeated like he was tasting the word for the first time in years. Family. Benny recovered within the week. He was weak at first, sleeping more than usual, eating little. But gradually his strength returned. His laugh came back. His endless questions about everything resumed. Josiah, can you teach me to trap? When you're older. Ruth got to help with the trial. That was dangerous. That was different. How come different? Because I said so. Benny scowled, but there was no real anger in it. He was testing boundaries the way children do when they feel safe enough to push. Ruth watched these exchanges with quiet amusement. He likes you, she told Josiah one evening when Benny had gone to bed and Eleanor was mending by the fire. He doesn't pester people he doesn't like. That's so. That's so. Ruth hesitated. I like you too, in case you were wondering. Josiah set down the knife he'd been sharpening. I was wondering, actually. Couldn't tell if you'd accepted me or were just tolerating me for your mama's sake. At first it was tolerating. Ruth was honest, she'd inherited that from Eleanor. I didn't know if you'd stay. Didn't know if you'd hurt her. She's been hurt enough. And now I see how you look at her, how you look at all of us. Ruth met his eyes. You look at us like we're precious, like we're worth protecting. My pa used to look at us that way. Josiah's throat tightened. Your pa was a good man. I could never replace him. I don't want you to replace him. I want you to be you. Ruth stood cross to where he sat. I want you to be the man who makes my mama smile again, who teaches Benny how to be strong, who stays when things get hard. She paused. Can you be that man? I can try. Then that's enough. Ruth surprised him with a quick hug, fierce and brief. Welcome to the family, Josiah Harlan. She walked away before he could respond. Josiah sat there for a long moment, the knife forgotten in his hands. When Eleanor looked up from her mending, she saw tears on his scarred cheeks. Josiah, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He wiped his face roughly. Everything's right. For the first time in 5 years, everything's right. February brought visitors. Wade Cotter rode up to McBride Hollow on a cold afternoon, his deputy's badge conspicuously absent from his coat. Eleanor met him at the door with Josiah's rifle in her hands. I'm not here to cause trouble, Wade said, quickly raising his hands. I came to apologize. Apologize. For what I did, for serving those papers, for being too much of a coward to stand up to Thorne when I knew he was wrong. Wade's face was gray with shame. I told myself I was just doing my job, that it wasn't personal, but it was personal to you, to your children. I helped destroy your life, and I've got no excuse for it. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. What do you want from me, Wade? Nothing. He stopped, swallowed. I wanted you to know I quit. Turned in my badge last week. I'm leaving Pinetop Crossing. Can't look at that town without seeing what I helped happen. Where will you go? Don't know yet. West, maybe. California. Somewhere I can start over. Try to be a better man. Eleanor lowered the rifle. My husband used to say that a man isn't defined by his worst moments. He's defined by what he does after them. She met Wade's eyes. You helped Thorne throw us out. But you also told me about this cave. You warned us when Thorne was coming. You helped Zeke find those papers. That doesn't make up for... No, it doesn't. But it's a start. Eleanor extended her hand. Go west, Wade Cotter. Find out who you want to be. And maybe someday you'll make peace with who you were. Wade stared at her hand like he didn't understand what it meant. Then he took it. Thank you, Mrs. McBride. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but thank you. I didn't say I forgave you. I said you have a chance to earn it. That's the best any of us can hope for. Wade nodded, mounted his horse, and rode away without looking back. Josiah appeared at Eleanor's shoulder. You let him off easy. Maybe. Or maybe I know what it's like to carry guilt you can't put down. She watched Wade disappear over the ridge. Either way, it's not my burden anymore. March came in like a lion. The storms were fierce wind and snow and ice that kept them huddled in the cave for days at a time. But the walls held. The chimney drew true. The home Eleanor had built with her own hands protected them from the worst the mountain could throw. One night after the children had gone to sleep, Josiah asked the question Eleanor had been expecting. What are we waiting for? She looked up from the quilt she was piecing. Waiting for what? To get married. You said you wanted to wait, make sure this wasn't grief talking. It's been 3 months. He moved to sit beside her. Do you still have doubts? Eleanor set down her needle. No, I don't have doubts. Then why are we still waiting? Because I'm scared. The admission hung in the air between them. Scared of what? Josiah asked gently. Of being happy. Of letting myself believe this is real. Eleanor's voice cracked. Every time I've let myself hope for something, it's been taken away. Samuel, our home. Everything I built here nearly burned to the ground. I'm scared that if I let myself be completely happy, something will come along and destroy it. Josiah took her hands. Eleanor, look at me. She did. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. I can't promise we won't face more hardship, more loss, more pain. That's life. That's the cost of being alive. His grip tightened. But I can promise I'll be there through all of it. Every storm, every fire, every enemy at the gate. I'll stand beside you until the day I die. And that's not a guarantee against pain. It's a guarantee that you won't face it alone. Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't deserve you. That's funny. I was about to say the same thing about you. She laughed through her tears, a wet, broken sound that held more joy than sorrow. All right, she said. All right. Let's stop waiting. You mean? I mean, let's get married. As soon as the weather clears. I don't want to spend another day not being your wife. Josiah pulled her into his arms and held her tight. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for giving me something to choose. The wedding took place on the first clear day in April. Reverend Nathaniel Stone made the journey up to McBride Hollow, his Bible tucked under his arm and a smile on his weathered face. Half the town came with him, Ida Brennan and Sarah Holbrook, and Agatha Whitmore. Zeke Cole and his wife family's Eleanor barely knew, but who'd heard the story and wanted to witness the ending. They gathered outside the cave in the clearing where Eleanor had fought Thorne's men, where she'd built her walls and hung her door, and refused to be broken. Ruth stood beside her mother, holding a bouquet of early wildflowers. Benny stood beside Josiah, clutching the rings with the solemnity of a boy entrusted with sacred duty. Dearly beloved, Reverend Stone began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Eleanor McBride and Josiah Harlan. Eleanor barely heard the words. She was looking at Josiah, at his scarred face, his steady eyes, his hands that had built and destroyed and healed. She was looking at her future. Do you, Josiah Harlan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. Josiah's voice was rough with emotion. I do with everything I am. And do you, Eleanor McBride, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Eleanor thought of Samuel, of the life they'd built together, the children they'd made, the love that had sustained her through 14 years of widowhood. She thought of Josiah, of the fire that had taken everything from him, the scars he carried inside and out, the choice he'd made to live again. She thought of Ruth and Benny, of the family they were becoming, of the home they'd built from nothing. "I do," she said, "with everything I am and everything I hope to be. Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Stone smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Josiah cupped Eleanor's face in his scarred hands and kissed her softly at first, then deeper, pouring years of loneliness and grief and hope into the touch. The crowd cheered. Ruth laughed and cried at the same time. Benny shouted, "Mama's married!" at the top of his lungs. And Eleanor McBride? No. Eleanor Harlan held her husband and felt the last piece of her broken heart click into place. That night, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Eleanor and Josiah stood outside the cave and looked up at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" Josiah asked. "Samuel? Mary? Daniel?" She felt him tense beside her. "Don't worry, it's not sadness. I'm thinking about how they'd feel if they could see us now." "And what do you think they'd feel?" "I think they'd be happy. I think they'd want this for us, this second chance, this new beginning." Eleanor leaned into him. "I think love doesn't die with the people we lose. It just changes shape, makes room for more." Josiah was quiet for a long moment. "Mary used to say something like that. She said hearts are like houses. They've always got room for one more guest if you're willing to open the door." Smart woman. She was. You'd have liked each other. I think I already do. Through you. Through the ring I'm wearing. Through the love you're giving me that she taught you to give. Josiah's arm tightened around her. "I never thought I'd have this again," he said quietly. "A family. A home. Someone to wake up next to. After the fire, I was so sure I'd spend the rest of my life alone that I stopped wanting anything else. And now I want everything. A long life with you. Watching Ruth grow up, maybe marry someday, have children of her own. Teaching Benny to hunt and trap and be a good man. Building something that lasts." He turned to face her. "I want to grow old with you, Eleanor. I want to sit on that porch we're going to build and watch our grandchildren run around this hollow. I want 50 years. I want forever." Eleanor's eyes burned with tears. "Then that's what we'll have. Whatever time we're given, we'll make it count." "Promise?" "Promise." They sealed it with a kiss there under the stars, while the mountain wind sang around them and the fire crackled inside their home. Spring turned to summer. Summer turned to fall. Fall turned to winter, and the cycle began again. Eleanor's hands grew more calloused, more capable. She learned to trap from Josiah, to track game, to read the weather in the clouds and the wind. She taught Ruth to sew, to cook, to manage a household. She watched Benny grow taller, stronger, more confident in his place in the world. And she loved. She loved her husband, who still woke sometimes with nightmares, but now had someone to hold him until they passed. She loved her children, who called Josiah Pa now without thinking about it. She loved this home she'd built from nothing, this hollow, that bore her name, this life that had risen from the ashes of everything she'd lost. One evening, a year after the wedding, Eleanor sat on the porch she and Josiah had built together and watched the sun set behind the ridge. Ruth sat beside her, a book open in her lap. Benny was down by the creek trying to teach Samuel the cat to catch fish. Josiah was inside preparing dinner, a task he'd claimed as his own because he said Eleanor deserved to rest sometimes. "Mama." Ruth looked up from her book. "Yes, baby." "Do you ever miss our old house, the one the bank took?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "Sometimes. I miss the memories we made there. I miss the room where you and Benny were born. I miss the kitchen where your father taught me to make biscuits." She paused. "But I don't miss what that house became. A place of grief. A reminder of everything I'd lost. And this place. Eleanor looked around at the solid walls, the straight-hanging door, the chimney that still drew true. At the garden they'd planted the chicken coop, Josiah had built the stable where 2 horses now lived. This place is different. This place is ours. We didn't inherit it or buy it, we built it. Every log, every stone, every nail. This place knows our hands, Ruth. It knows our sweat and our tears and our hope. She smiled. This place isn't a reminder of what we lost. It's proof of what we survived. Ruth was quiet for a moment. I want to build something like this someday. Something that's mine. You will. Whatever you put your mind to, you'll build it. How do you know? Because you're my daughter, and McBride women don't quit. Ruth smiled the same fierce smile Eleanor saw in her own mirror. No, ma'am, we don't. Josiah stepped out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a cloth. Dinner's ready. Benny, stop terrorizing that cat and come eat. I'm not terrorizing him. I'm educating him. Educate him later. Food's getting cold. Benny came running, the cat at his heels. They piled into the house together, this mismatched family of survivors, this collection of broken people who'd somehow made each other whole. Eleanor paused at the door, looking back at the hollow one more time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The creek glittered in the fading light. The first star appeared above the ridge. She thought of Samuel lying in Virginia dirt, dying for a country that would let a banker steal from his widow. She thought of Mary and Daniel Harlan taken by fire and greed and cruelty. She thought of Cornelius Thorne hanged 3 months ago, his empire of fraud and murder finally brought to justice. And she thought of herself, the widow who'd been thrown out with nothing, who'd built a home in a cave, who'd fought and bled and nearly died for the right to exist. She'd won. Not easily, not without cost. But she'd won. Mama! Ruth called from inside. You coming? Eleanor smiled. I'm coming, baby. I'm right here. She stepped through the door into warmth and laughter and the smell of good food. Her husband caught her eye and smiled. Her daughter set the table. Her son was already reaching for the bread. This was her life now. This was her family. This was the home she'd built with her own 2 hands in a hollow that bore her name, surrounded by people who loved her. The bank had thrown her out with nothing. She'd built everything. And as Eleanor McBride Harlan sat down to dinner with her family, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was home. She was loved. And nothing, not fire, not flood, not the cruelest winter or the greediest man, would ever take that away from her again.